And that being said, we're ready for our first speaker, Ralitsa Lyutskanova. I hope I got that close to right. Has taught English as a second language for many years in Bulgaria. She currently teaches at Sofia University, where she works with both students and training teachers. Additionally, she works for the Sofia-based Foundation for Educational Transformation, where she provides methodological support and develops educational resources. She has adopted the TPAC framework and teaching walkthroughs, and she possesses a Google Education certificate. Her workshop today is going to be, or the title is Digital Detectives, Critical Thinking. That's a kind of core theme that we keep coming back to this week, and Global Citizenship. Ralitsa, are you ready?
Hi all, I'm ready. I hope you hear me well.
Yes.
Okay, great. So just 1 second so I can share my presentation with you. It seems, okay. So I hope you'll be able to see it in a second. Right there. Oh. Here it is. So, welcome everyone. As you heard, I'm Ralitsa. It's really nice to meet you all. And it's a pleasure to host a workshop on global citizenship through the lens of the ESL classroom and media literacy. I chose the proposed topic because it aligns with my interests, both as a practitioner and an academic. I've been working with teachers on different frameworks in the English classroom for 3 years as a mentor now. And due to the rapid evolution of the digital world, the need to develop workable strategies for the 21st century literacies became crucial for my colleagues and me. The objectives of today include defining literacies and their importance in teaching and learning English as a foreign language, focusing on the importance of critical thinking and working with strategies that develop it, and what to do and what not to do when we design activities aimed at developing media and connected literacies. So we're all aware that we are contemporaries of the information age. Information and data are overwhelming and everywhere. While in the past, the teacher's job was focused on passing information, today our job is to evaluate information, to develop and sustain skills in our students that will help them distinguish between fact and fiction, and give them tools to find reason and rhyme in a seemingly boundless ocean of information. And last but not least, turn information into knowledge and awareness, which are characteristics of global citizens. In other words, as the popular summary of ancient tradition goes, education is the kindling of a flame, not the filling of a vessel. Before we begin on how to do that, it is fitting to go through some fundamental notions and definitions that will provide the common ground of shared understanding and clear connectivity between theory and practice, which is why I'd like to begin with literacy and literacies, and a lengthy quote from the foreword of a book called The Researched Guide to Literacy, edited by James Murphy, who writes, I begin the quote, "Every domain of knowledge has a literacy handle these days, it seems. There is digital literacy, cultural literacy, critical literacy, emotional literacy, financial literacy. The list is very long. The appropriation of the term to these other domains has somewhat diminished the power of the original term in the same way which cliches lose their original meaning. But what all these terms have in common is that the literacy part denotes mastery of the conventions of that domain. Digital literacy means that we are familiar enough with how computers work to be able to use them to process information. Financial literacy means that we know the basics about how to manage our money, so that we don't get caught by deals that sound good but aren't. In the same way, literacy in its original sense means mastery of the written code. It is shallow thinking to conceive of such vital skills as basic or lower order. In our modern world, they are the intellectual equivalent of breathing. And I close the quote. I chose this quote for several reasons. It stresses the importance and fundamental nature of literacy and represents the idea that has occupied modernity since the Industrial Revolution, which gave ground for some researchers to argue that the epoch of Romanticism never ended, namely the idea that we, humans, need to know how machines operate, so that we use intrinsic mechanisms in knowing how to work with information and turn it into knowledge. And finally, because the quote highlights the link between language and all domains of human knowledge. Since the 19th century, with the great expansion of linguistics and anthropology, the emergence of the Sapir-Whorf of hypothesis and so on, the field of language acquisition has been increasingly aware of the connection between culture and language. Today, we can hardly argue that English has gradually become something like a lingua franca, a common language that connects, expands, serves the striving for a global world. In this respect, English is a gateway language to different cultures and their vast array of traditions, mindsets, notions, etc., which puts the English language learner in the role of an adventurous explorer who can delve into different cultural worlds, both digitally and non-digitally. So my argumentation is that despite the enormous amount of positives that framing the English language as a gateway language might have, it also exposes the learner to a great amount of information which needs to be processed. This is a position of vulnerability, and every English teacher needs to be aware of the implications. In order to prepare our students to be global citizens, we need to prioritize bias awareness, critical thinking, and an in-depth understanding of cultural roles, as well as foster ethical participation in our interactions with others. I'm sure that all of you have used the fact or fiction exercise and the language detectives game in some form in their classrooms. I've personally adopted the language detective game, which I first discovered in a handbook. It was a methodology booklet for primary teachers printed by Oxford University Press. And I've used this language detectives game in many ways, including with my college students. What I value and want my detectives to realize is that language is everywhere around us, and it is very powerful. I can't count the times when my foreign language students return to the classroom after we have practiced the language detective game, amazed at the extension of clues they were able to find everywhere around them. Although we live in Bulgaria and English is not an official language. The activity we're going to look at now is a combination of both fact, fiction, and language detectives. Its sole purpose is to highlight the necessity of information evaluation and recognizing bias. It's reliable. Is it reliable information, and how do I know that? What can I do to check the information I'm reading about, hearing, etc.? So here we're going to stress on the role of media and how my train of thought works to fact-check information. And this goes by asking the right questions. Maybe you have heard, maybe you have not, the term illusion of familiarity. It concerns information that we constantly hear around us. It might be something we've heard from our neighbors, from our colleagues, from friends. What it creates is this illusion that we know something and we know it as a fact, but in reality, it is not. It is rather a belief, so it can misguide us to thinking something as reliable when it is not. So how do we become language and digital detectives? As I said, we start this exercise by thinking aloud on a piece of information, and I'm going to give details in a minute. Then we check the source by asking appropriate questions, doing some research, and we ask the questions that you can see on the slide. Who created this? Why? Why was it shared? Do you know the facts? And what is missing to make it a reliable piece of information? It's an activity that develops critical thinking. But what is critical thinking and why is it important? That's what I'm going to spend some time talking about. Well, there are several basic definitions on critical thinking. If we look at it etymologically, the term derives from the Greek word kritikos, which means able to judge, and criterion, which is some sort of a standard. In this context, critical thinking is defined as insightful judgment based on standards. John Dewey, who was the creator of the concept, links thinking to the confrontation with a problem. According to him, a student thinks critically only when they struggle with the conditions of a given problem and seek their own solution. Dewey also uses the concept of inquiry to describe the actions involved in transforming an unclear situation into a well-structured and solvable one. Robert Ennis defines the term as reasonable and reflective thinking that focuses on deciding what to believe and what not to believe. Some other researchers think or define rather critical thinking as the intellectual process of conceptualizing, applying, analyzing, synthesizing, and evaluating information gathered through various means such as observation, experience, reasoning. And according to Richard Paul, critical thinking is the art of analyzing and evaluating thinking in order to improve it. That being said, we can say that critical thinking contains three main components: analytical one, evaluative one, and creative one. So we know that when these components work together within the framework of so-called higher order thinking, which encompasses processes such as analysis, synthesis, evaluation, and decision-making, we have critical thinking not as something outside the classroom, but as integrated in it. And here we rely on Bloom's taxonomy, which also points out this higher order thinking skills in its framework. So critical thinking is tightly linked to the universal intellectual standards. For thinking to be of high quality and in-depth, there are some key elements of the critical process. Those are clarity, understanding of meaning. If a statement is unclear, obviously, we cannot assess its truth. Truth is the next element of critical process, the need to verify whether a given statement actually corresponds to reality or not. Accuracy. Here, we look into sufficient detail and specificity to determine if something is accurate or not. Relevance, depth, and breadth or scope, as well as logic and fairness. Fairness will refer to equal treatment of all relevant viewpoints that are represented without being influenced from personal interests or selfish motives. So this is the framework that we as teachers use, and we incorporate it into different activities to form this critical thinking into our students. As I said, they are indebted into practice. And language detective game or digital detective game, as it is processed and presented to students, serves as such an activity. So they are presented with some sort of a heading, like the ones you see here on this slide. Then, depending on their level, they are either separated into groups, they work together, or they work individually to determine what kind of information they're facing. Is it a fact or is it a fiction? And there is a discussion with some scaffolding for lower level students that determine that. So here, as I said, all of these are taken from like the digital space, obviously. They circulated to different social media channels, Instagram, Facebook, even online news sites. There are examples taken from a guidebook financed by an Erasmus Plus project. And the team behind this project compiled this workbook that is available as a PDF file. It can also serve as a guiding resource for teachers. So they chose different topics, several major spheres of life, like education, communication, health, as you can see from the examples given here. And they're used as a basis for the activity that I told you about. So probably most of us are familiar with the first one. I at least have received the question, what can we learn a language in 2 weeks, a month, or rather quickly? Well, probably not. Or at least I don't know a person who has learned a language in 2 weeks. So it is a popular misconception. It touches on the idea of the illusion of familiarity, because people can say, I've heard it, my friend heard it, it might be true, when it is not. So the second one, it is my favorite. Facebook will close accounts containing misspellings. I like to walk into a classroom, introduce the statement, and then follow up with the think, pair, share activity on its validity, or a debate with B2C1 students. Most of the students are not confused about the truth of this statement. However, according to the people who compiled the information on the Erasmus Plus project, they found out that a Spanish news outlet reported this as a fact, which reinforces once again the importance of developing critical thinking skills. And the third one is also a very popular misconception. Understandably, when facing a bad prognosis, people are prone to search for alternatives, and that's fine. However, in some cases, neglecting traditional medicine and choosing a healthy diet as a main treatment for cancer might be life-threatening, and it is a good example for a debate starter. As I said, the activity that I have been talking about is easily adaptable, can be transformed for all levels of learners. With beginners, there is heavy scaffolding. We have cards with useful language, a lot of repetition and modeling. I go through my process of thinking out loud. I say what I think or I don't think. Then for middle level students, as I said, I use think, pair, share activity. Sometimes I can add critical thinking checklist for evaluation. And with high levels, We can use debates, projects, or even research tasks that touch upon fact or fiction. And the other activity I try in my classroom to develop critical thinking in my students is the headline swap. It highlights on the power of language, makes them realize that their language detectives role morphs into digital detectives, that they need to be aware of the nuances of meaning and also intention. The goal of this task is to develop group work skills, presenting opinions, and expressing agreement, disagreement. They are separated into groups. They might also work collaboratively on a Google Docs document. They present their thoughts, opinions on the meaning behind the title they are presented with, the topic of the given article, and the keywords used. Then we swap headlines between groups, and each group evaluates the ways the new headline matches or does not match the notes they made, and what different understanding emerges from the new formulation. At the end, they look at all the titles and must determine which is the best fitting one for the article, which they are also given to read. So this activity is also very easy to prepare, and students learn how to compare perspectives, ask a lot of questions, and communicate disagreement respectfully. They also learn that when we participate in a digital environment, they have to be aware of their own responsibility on their digital footprint. And here, there is example of a headline swap. These all refer to the same piece of information. The article in question is the use of an AI integrated instrument that uses pictures of the old town of Plovdiv and its citizens to create a lifelike, VR-like restoration of the city from 100 years ago. And all of these come from from trustworthy sources. Yet they serve as an illustration how syntax, pragmatics, semantics work together to enhance the communication function of a language. It's also a good exercise in thinking about words, their power, how important it is, not only what we say or write, but also how we do it, how we phrase what we want to say. And I'd like you to look at the headlines as you are now aware of the story, and choose for yourselves a headline that you think is most suitable for the story that I outlined for you. And then you can maybe type why you chose this one exactly. I personally would choose the third one because it's maybe the most expressive. And also because it doesn't mention the instrument that was used. Nevertheless, whatever you choose, as I said, they're all, yeah, okay, Samantha agrees with number 3. Fine. I'll leave it to you. Yeah, well, it's simple. The first one, you're right. As I said, the material is one, the story is one, but the journalists that wrote the story decided to present it in a different way, and they put emphasis on different things. Okay. So the two techniques exercises will only work if we are aware of the following when we design them. Okay. If we choose safe topics, which it's needless to say that politics are not a good idea, or religion, or some extra sensitive ones that are bound to divide the class around beliefs rather than facts. And the focus should always be on how and what we think and the mechanisms employed in thinking that are based on deductions, not beliefs. We also need to create clear outcomes and defined expectations, rubrics for success criteria. And they will all ensure that students are aware of the objectives of the task and how to get there. The role of the teacher is also important. As I said, a teacher should function as a facilitator, helping and navigating to support developing critical thinking skills rather than be a know-it-all and I have all the answers teachers, because when we assume such a role, we cannot achieve that. We cannot achieve tolerant speaking and presenting our opinion without fear or bias. So these are all the prerequisites that lead to language learning, which acts as a media literacy tool. As I said several times, critical thinking is rooted in questioning, and explicitly taught skills and routines have a long-term impact in our students. So we have to design activities rather simple as these ones, as I presented today, or others that come naturally in our classroom to help them develop critical thinking. And I came to rather rushly to the end of my presentation, but I'd like to propose a reflection strategy at the end of it. It also stems from the walkthroughs practices. It is a sentence with some phrases. It starts with if I want to develop critical thinking in my students, then I'll do that and that, so that they become global citizens and they are responsible for their actions in the digital era. Okay, so this is my supposed reflection, and I guess this is the time when we answer questions in the end of this presentation. Thank you.
That was incredible. Someone said that they felt like it was building on one of the sessions we had this morning, which I agree. I feel like it's a slightly like lots of similar kind of perspectives and slightly different approaches to critical thinking, media literacy, things like this. Fantastic. Does anybody have any questions? I think everyone's feeling a bit tired after a busy 3 days of conference. Any questions? I have a quick question. Obviously, you're teaching at the University of Sofia, so are all these activities designed with university age students in mind?
Not necessarily. My experience comes from teaching in high school. So basically, this was the age group that I had in mind. But as I said, they're all easily adaptable for all ages. And I think it's important that we employ critical thinking strategies from very, very early on. It's actually a debate in my country now with the emergence of AI and everything. So it is a hot topic.
I agree. I've been reflecting on critical thinking a lot recently. Thinking about how I educate my own child and how I get him to think critically and thinking about his future. And one thing that scares me is where I live, which is South Korea, has one of the, I think, really lacks critical thinking in education. And there was an interesting stat recently about the number of young people and adults that struggle to identify between real and fake information and fake news, and it was it's a really high number of people who can't do that in Korea. And so I've been reflecting on this a lot, and I do think earlier and earlier, by the time someone enters university, they're kind of already participating in the world and consuming news, and actually building their critical thinking skills needs to start much younger in their high school education and perhaps even earlier. So I think it's something that is very present in everyone's minds these days.
I think so. Sorry.
No, it's okay. I'm going to pop the certificate link in the chat. So if you would like to receive a certificate for this session, you can click the link, complete the short form, and your certificate will be automatically sent to you within 24 hours or so. As Yulia has kindly added, it also, if you're on mobile, sometimes it doesn't work brilliantly. So it's best to use the link on desktop. Okay. Awesome. Well, yes. I'll wait a few seconds, see if anyone else asks questions. But in the meantime, thank you everyone for an amazing 3 days of conference. It's been incredible. Last year was fantastic. This year I feel like we perfected things, and I feel like we really nailed it with a group of fantastic speakers, a mix of kind of people talking about big ideas, people talking about practical classroom suggestions. We tackled some really big topics, global citizenship, critical thinking, media literacy. We talked a lot. A common theme, I think, was kind of getting back to basics and going back to analog and getting students doing hands-on things, drawing, moving away from screens, which again, I think is a really ever-present thought in people's minds these days. I mean, Sally, I don't think it's an end at all. It's January. We've got a whole year of things ahead. We've already got workshops and events that we've got planned. We've got teacher guides. We've got lots of Twinkl ESL content coming soon. I recommend following us on social media, as well as signing up to the website so that you can see these things, and you can get involved in all our future events. Can we find recordings of the last year's conference? Yes, they are also all on YouTube. Check out our YouTube channel and you can see the conference videos from last year too. Thank you, everyone. That was an amazing 3 days. I'm certainly ready for bed. It's 3 a.m., nearly 3 a.m. here in Korea, but I'm glad we did it. It's been a fantastic week. I feel like I've learned a lot, and I feel like even the Twinkl team have ended this conference really inspired for the year ahead.
Thank you.
Awesome. I'll finish the recording. Please do hang on if anyone has any extra questions.